Councillor Linda,
Sorry.
you have a request to put some money.
I do. And
sorry, Mr. Mayor, I did want to speak on that.
Well, Ross, I was actually, is this specifically on this issue? Well, what I've said is I just want the matter to lie on the table and it'll come back a little bit later in the agenda. All right?
Yeah, I thought there was going to be discussion tonight between parties.
No, I was just, well, I mean, what I've asked Roger to do is talk to Denise over the next hour or so, find a bit of time.
It could be relevant. One is to add the foe. The foe should be put in there within the body of it. But the second thing is, should we be weaving in related ports future strategy outcomes? Because remember, Ports of Auckland own the Onehunga port.
They do.
So it is not, they're going to be investigating, we are going to be investigating the ramifications for the Onehunga port as well, / Manukau, as we are the Waitemata downtown.
I'd rather just leave.
Okay, look, we've got a mover and a seconder, and
Roger picking that up.
Yeah, just I think the best idea is just to have this chat with Roger about the issue around technology. I think that's the underlying issue. Yeah. Michael, can this thing...
I just want to sound a cautionary note here. This is a feel-good gesture and actually turns out to be very, very expensive. But I think in terms of spatial plans, be very, very careful about what you're asking for here. A spatial plan doesn't necessarily protect the environment whatsoever. If you want to protect the environment of a harbour or anything else, protect it. Don't plan it. Thank you.
This is not a plan. This is understanding the harbour.
Yeah.
Well, it's the start of a spatial plan. You start a whole bureaucratic process.
Look,
just to feel good.
I'm enjoying the freestyle discussion, but I'm not really agreeing to allow it to happen. So
saying is don't do any backstroke.
Yep, thank you very much. Right, so we'll await any further reports. Okay. Councillor Linda.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This isn't a plan. This is action. I'm asking for the budget for the Sustainable Neighbourhood Program, which got the backing of 3 local boards to put it back there, just for 1 year, because I don't believe that we've, though the staff have done some work on transitioning, it's been a very short process. We only started our community empowerment model in February and we're still not finished yet. We've still got more meetings to go on that. When I look at this program, it isn't about a plan, it's about 500 volunteers looking after 540 hectares of land. They've planted over 10,000 trees and removed 73,000 tonnes of weeds. That's not insignificant. It's about $300 a head for each volunteer a year. And if we look at and some would say, oh, it's only in one area, but that part of the region is 40% of our native vegetation, and we've got these people working their hearts out, keeping those weeds at bay. We've already reduced the weed management budget and pest management, and this is one of the cheaper ways we can keep that at bay, but also it is a way to build community, because they'll be focused on improving their natural environment in their local areas. But basically they are working around the ranges. That's one of our largest parks. And I'm asking for the increase in the budget, because I'm very aware with the very generous reinstatement of the last resolution that our staff have had to go away and find that from other budgets. So what you're effectively doing is you put this in and then you take something else out, and that's not the intention of this at all. The intention is to keep those volunteers getting rid of our weeds without sprays, building their communities and their cohesion, and getting the job done a lot more cheaply than we can do with contractors, and a lot more effectively, because these people do it with love, because they love their communities and they don't want them infested with weeds. So yes, it is adding in some money. It's a very small amount. You know, it's not 6 million. It's not. It's not even 1 million. It's 161, and I'm even prepared to whack off, 1,000 and make it 160. Even 150 would be great. But I think we've got to continue to encourage people that are out there doing good things instead of vandalising and the other things we have to deal with in our other facilities. Thank you. And I think-
Okay, is there a seconder?
Yes, it's already been seconded by Deputy Mayor.
Penny. One of the things that actually I think we need to reflect on here is this, of course, adds without any subtraction to what, we've basically agreed. And so...
Some of the arts.
Yeah, I need, I can see this, I can see one or two other asks. So one of the things that I would like to do is actually look at that at the end of everything else that we've gone through, if that's all right. Try and make a decision around what that might look like in terms of money, etc. So what I think we ought to do, because there's not a lot here extra that's been asked for, and I really appreciate people's their wariness to just sort of throw a whole lot of stuff in, given the fact that we've gone through a really long process. Where do you stop? So no, I know you do, Linda, and most everyone else does. So what I would like to do is, can we just leave that there with any
the
other
table?
requests coming through for
Okay.
money, and let's just have a look at it at the end of the process, and then maybe we can make a decision around what that might look like. All right? So I
Appreciate
totally
that.
agree that it's it's a worthy cause, but hell, there's so many worthy causes. So we just need to make a call around that. Is that all right? So we've got to move in a second, and if that one lies on the table for a final determination once we get the final shape of how everything's looking. Okay? Christine, if I leave it lie on the table, we can perhaps have the final discussion then?
Mr. Chairman, the concern that I would have, and I expressed it at our workshop yesterday to you, is in this area, rather than dealing with site-specific initiatives, I was actually looking and asking questions of our officers yesterday. How do we build up the resilience and grow the army of volunteers that are going to be necessary to work with us, not just in the West, but across the region?
Yep.
And so if we're going to let this lie, I wonder whether officers can come back to us and show us how, in the most cost-effective way possible, we can actually deliver better outcomes there, taking into account those regional needs and the sort of support which is not well understood in terms of days of health and safety and everything else that you need in terms of giving capabilities to volunteers. So it's that sort of alignment. So if you would entertain that, I would feel much more comfortable that it's not just this specific amendment, it's looking at an amendment that will actually accommodate the concerns that I expressed yesterday to you, that on this area that we're debating at the moment on page 31, there are quite a few gaps that I feel may be there, and I just want to make sure that the officers have addressed those.
Yeah, Dean? Fine?
Yes, we'll undertake to do that. I see this proposed amendment being about transition,
Yep.
and
That is-
I agree with Councillor Fletcher that the challenge before us is how we transition from us supporting, doing everything, to us actually enabling
Fair,
communities.
yep.
So we'll deal with that.
Okay, good. Right, now, we can go to governance and support.
I had a question.
Oh,
Mr.
sorry. Councillor Wayne.
Mayor. And I would hope that process of looking at things just digs down into some of the detail. For example, my understanding is that the green rig or Te Waka Kororo could be flogged off. Now, I mean, that's a resource that we got for next to nothing from Wellington Regional Council. It's been used for LTP consultation, local boards and the like. Hardly any money's been spent on it, I think. It also helps to enhance volunteerism.
Councillor Wayne, we
community
actually had a good
engagement.
discussion
that
about
great
that
big
in your
rig?
absence.
Yes.
So I'm not really going to take, sort of a discussion around those lines. You can't come into a process at this point in time and deal with that stuff when we've dealt with it. That's the price you pay for not being here. But you are here for the decision making, and I don't want a relitigation of the bus.
decision-making.
Sorry, it's not.
This is the public part where things happen.
Yes, it is,
Oh, it's
councillor
just
Wayne.
something
Wait,
that-
if you had
something that
concerns,
happened
if you had
not in the
concerns,
public
you should have emailed them through or something like that. Right, now, I'm going to go to governance and support. So we've got E, F and G there.
I've got an amendment there too, Mr Mayor.
Oh, where's that?
I'm sure Councillor Quack's will support.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Can I speak to that, Mr Mayor?
Oh, just hang on. I want to do, move that down, please. So E, F and G. If there's no speakers on that, I'll move those in
Oh,
group.
just, Mr Mayor, just on the Ngāti Whātua Aoraki Reserves Board,
Yep.
it's slightly disingenuous to say we're increasing the funding, because what we're effectively doing is reinstating the funding cut. So I'd rather hear it being placed, more representative would be to reinstate the funding of Ngāti Whātua
Yeah.
Aoraki Reserves Board. I think increasing, is we're not increasing it, we're actually just, we cut it by 30% and
Yeah.
increasing it by not
You could probably do the same for comment, actually.
reinstate.
Okay. Right, I'm going to move those. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Those against? That was councillor Penny W supported that. Right, councillor Brewer, let's have a look at your, Steve, can you come here, please?
Am I able to speak to it, Mr Mayor?
Oh, yes.
Now?
I do want you to get me a seconder.
I think Councillor Quacks is...
Excellent.
I'll second it for the sake of discussion.
You do note that additional comment, don't you, councillor Camp? For the sake of discussion. I recall councillor Quacks using that quite often when he tended to wax and wane around his support and seconding a
Almost,
motion.
it's almost taking pity, isn't it?
It comes from playing poker.
Okay, councillor Camp.
Look, and again, Mr Mayor, Stephen's made, the Chief Executive's made his views and his desires around staff remuneration and contractors and consultants are very clear, and so I don't want to get into debate with management on this. It is all very debatable. I have arguably in the last 4 years, every year, raised this every year, had pushback from management, and every year the figures keep going up. And so my suggestion, I believe, picks up some of the public sentiment, in fact overwhelming public sentiment for that support and governance category, was about getting a handle on our wage and salary budget. We've talked about Ngāti Whātua Aoraki Reserves Board and a couple other co-governance models, but we haven't actually addressed the big elephant in the room for a lot of people, Councillor Quacks, which is the wage and salary staff budget. And one of the disappointments I have with this process, Mr Mayor, is that, and it's happening around local government up and down the country, is that we don't have the visibility of the operational budgets. I think we had better visibility to those that remember the 2012 process and those that can see Councillor Sandra Coney going through the OPEX lists line by line as to where the spending was. And I think staff at the time probably found that quite unhelpful. And so what we don't see now is line by line OPEX breakdowns. We see top line CCO OPEX, for example, AT'd going from 61 million to 87 million, all included on all their total funding. And so we see the top line, but as far as departmental OPEX goes, we see the CapEx as per our list, as per our folders here of the major projects, but we don't see the operational breakdowns, and that's one disappointment. One way, I think, to get a handle on our budgets if we haven't got exposure to the operational budgets is to put a freeze on the top line wage and salary budget. That doesn't necessarily mean everyone's wages and salaries are frozen. What that means is that we freeze the budget from 721 million as is purported in the next financial year
for the next 3 years and review it in the next long-term plan process. This is a common practice that we've seen post-GFC in the private sector. It's a practice that we saw at one time under Auckland City Council. So it's not uncommon. What is uncommon, Mr Mayor, as I articulated earlier, is a wage and salary bill increasing by 29%. The Chief Executive and others might argue, well, if we're trying to get people off contracts and consultants, you know, how do we then incorporate those jobs inside the budget? And I accept that there is movement between the two, between full-time staffers and contractors and consultants. But I also note, and I know we have the argument of versus full-time staff versus full-time equivalents and that, but the overall budget, the group budget, has gone up from 615 million per annum in 2011 to 721 million, and it's going to go up another 200, nearly 200 million to 905 million, and so we've got a big increase, and I'm suggesting that we freeze it. I'm suggesting that this reflects strong public sentiment. I'm suggesting that if we freeze the top-line budget, managers can still redeploy those resources. There might be a case where there's some natural attrition where people's jobs aren't replaced. There might be a case where good performers continue to get the pay rises, others may not. There might be a case of redeployment of staff, but as Councillor Quack said earlier, we really do need to get a handle on this budget. When you look at the likes of comms and marketing, I think you were talking about 144 people. And the best way we can get a handle on this budget is not talking about it, as I do every year and the figures keep heading north, but actually turning off the tap. That is what management has told us is the best way to deal with projects or things that you don't want to continue, is to turn off the tap. So I'm saying turn off the tap, hold the budget at next financial year's levels for 3 years. It's not a big ask. It's nearly $750 million. Let's work within that massive financial envelope and let's review it in 3 years. I think that's a prudent thing to do, and I think that responds to the overwhelming of public feedback to our draft consultation, which said they wanted us to get a handle on wage and salary costs at this organisation.